Back again.
All right, guys, back again. Yes, I don't even know what part we're on because, well, we've done a lot of videos, but guys...
Part 3?
Part 3 to 4? I think 4 maybe. Next question for the Brian Weissman Q&A. It's probably, if we did a live stream, this would be probably like 2 hours long already. This is from Leandro Scudero.
All right.
Scudero from Spain, probably. Good question. Can the format be interesting for others other than the 30 and 40-year-old nostalgic memories?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
I.e., is the format still fun and interesting and attractive for the new generation? I think that's what I'm reading. Great question.
Truthfully, no. And it hurts me to say that a little bit. And people are welcome to kind of throw their collective intelligence and ingenuity at the format to try to figure out a way to play it on a budget, to play it without the staples. I think fundamentally at the end of the day, it's a bit of a fool's errand. Not to call the people that try that a fool, it's just an expression. But the problem is the variance and power level of the restricted list is so high, it just makes a sizable portion of games almost counterfeit from the get-go, where you can almost ignore a sizable portion of what your opponent does because you just bury them in an avalanche of restricted cards. You start the game, I mean, one of the games that we played a little bit earlier, it actually turned into a game because you happen to have a strip mine in your hand, but I went turn 1 Sapphire Ancestral Library of Alexandria. That is a turn 1 kill against practically every deck. Certainly if they don't have a strip mine in hand, the game is instantaneously over. It doesn't matter what strategy you're using, you're going to lose to that for sure. And if your deck doesn't have the potential to do that because you don't own the restricted list, then you don't have the ability to win your fair share of games where you just restricted card your opponent to death. They're what we used to call ancestral games, because Ancestral Recall, there's 2 different, I guess, divisions of cards in Magic that occupy the very, very top echelon of power level. I think the most universally powerful card in all of Magic is Ancestral Recall, in terms of the card that is pretty much always has upside to draw. There's never a bad time to draw Ancestral Recall, really. Even if your opponent has 3 black vices and play against you, it's still a good card to draw. Library of Alexandria is the most powerful pure card in terms of its ability to completely warp and affect a game and win a game by itself, but it doesn't have the same universal power level that Ancestral Recall has, and you only need to look at, say, modern or contemporary vintage to see that. There's Ancestral Recall is in every single deck that has blue, and Library is in many decks that don't have blue. I mean, I should say Library is in many, there are many decks that don't even run the Library of Alexandria at all.
I think his question, though, I think we got the question a little bit. And by the way, great information on the library and Ancestral. His question is, I think you answered it very quickly. You just said no. Nostalgic memories, I think what he's talking about here is that...
is it a format that newer players can enjoy?
Right. I think what he's talking about isn't about... Yeah, he's asking...
That's a different approach. I was operating on the assumption that he was saying, is there a place in Old School for people who have picked up the game in the last 5 to 10 years,
gotcha,
and people who are willing to make the investment to actually own the cards that matter the most, but don't have the wealth of experience that these older players have that they're bringing to the table? In that respect, I would say unequivocally yes.
Like for example, the people you saw LurkerCon for.
Yeah. Plenty of people there have not been playing for very long. I've played against multiple people that have only been playing for a few years.
Yep.
And certainly saw plenty of people like that. And the basic skill set that allows you to play and enjoy Old School is something you can probably acquire in a few months of playing the game. You won't be able to play it to the degree that will allow you to win Old School tournaments probably, but you'll be able to at least enjoy the format. And if you're willing to make the investment, you can go toe-to-toe with the super powerful, fully fleshed out decks.
Right.
And I think that there's plenty of room for enjoyment for a relatively new player in Magic. That said, I would not recommend going into Old School as your first foray into Magic. I think that there's a lot of value in kind of taking a systematic progression towards acquiring skill in Magic. I think that it's good to start with limited formats because they teach you about careful resource management, and they teach you about mana curve, and they teach you about creature combat. If you go straight to Old School, you're not going to even know how creatures interact, because creatures don't even interact in Old School. Many people play hundreds of games in Old School and never even attack with anything but a Mishra's Factory. And they certainly don't know how creature combat works, or the stack, or any of those intricacies of the game that really matter to understand Magic as a more complex thing.
Yeah.
And then that skill set will allow you to branch off and play in other formats. And so I do run into people who have been playing Magic for 20 plus years who don't know the first thing about very basic rules.
Right.
You know, people that, like, I'll have a control magic or a treachery on their creature, they'll disenchant the treachery and then try to attack me with the creature. I'm like, dude, you can't attack with that. It has summoning sickness. And they go, whoa, 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 it's been in play for 9 turns. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, they don't even understand something as basic as that. And it's because they've played this very small, myopic format. And that same thing is true for people who play Old School, many of whom have been playing for many, many years.
Right.
They're not up on the modern rules. So I think, to answer his question the way that you the way that you couched it, I think that yes, there is a lot of enjoyment that can be had by someone, but with the obvious caveat that you need to be willing to make the investment to at least have some degree of the restricted list so that you can compete with others who have it. If you don't have that, you're going to be at such a disadvantage out of the gate. You're just going to have that horrible, like, my opponent just ancestraled me to death. But you're going to have that feeling like every other game because you don't have your own power, your own restricted list to offset their restricted list.
Okay. Great answers. To that point, what do you think about proxies for Old School as just a casual thing? Well, we're not talking about tournament play.
Yeah,
proxies.
I think proxies casually are fine. I honestly think that playing with proxies in tournaments cheapens the format, and I think that it removes a fair amount of the mystique. I think one of the things that's so compelling about the format and just things like Magic in general is that having activities that have aspirational goals, be they a collectible thing, be they jobs, be they, I mean, there's a million different
personalization of altars, whatever.
I'm not talking about even in the context of Magic. I'm talking in a much broader sense. Aspirational goals drive humans to be ambitious, to try hard at things. Having things that you strive for, things that you envy and admire, is a good thing and has motivated humans since time immemorial. And having those things in Magic, having things that are not accessible to the average person that have a degree of mystique and mystery about them, is very good for the game and very good for the format. And if you just tell people, oh, you can just go into a tournament and proxy 10 cards in your deck so that we all have a level playing field, sure, it makes the format more accessible, but it just is like a shortcut to ownership of this stuff that's supposed to be special. It just doesn't feel special if I can just proxy all the cards in my deck. It removes that as kind of an appealing thing.
Will that sound like an elitist comment? I don't mean to be argumentative, but to some people that kind of feels
maybe
like...
it does, but the whole world is elitist, and it's all to degrees. There are plenty of people who can't play standard format because they can't afford a play set of like the 8 different mythic rares that are topical and needed in standard. They can't afford a play set of whatever the rares are. You know, if they don't have a sizable portion of disposable income, then they have no access to standard. But is standard an elitist format? I wouldn't say that it's an elitist format. The same thing is true for Commander as well. There's plenty of people who aspire to own their first revised dual land in their Commander deck because they have to just play with shock lands for their dual lands and stuff. And having the people that feel like you shouldn't be able to proxy stuff in EDH, you shouldn't be able to proxy the revised dual lands, they're not being elitist. They're basically just saying that there should be some stuff that's special.
Right.
Just because something is special doesn't make it elitist. And I don't think that the format, at least on a tournament level, is really helped by having just a larger group of people who are kind of just coming into the format with no real personal investment in it because they've just simply slap together some laser printed scans and they're just going to go to the old school tournament with their fake ancestral recall and stuff. I just don't think that it adds enough to it, and while it may add something to it, I don't think that what it adds counteracts what is taken away from the format by just kind of cheapening it to a degree.
Okay. And
it's easy, of course, it's easy for me to say that from my own perspective, given the fact that I was lucky enough in the right place and at the right time to be able to acquire all of the old school Type 1 staples back when they cost practically nothing. I don't know if you recall that story I told you before about that place in Palo Alto that would sell rares, unlimited rares, any unlimited rare for $2 from their binder.
Holy crap.
Yeah, which is unthinkable, and by today's context, the idea of buying a mint Time Walker, mint Ancestral for $2, but that was the reality at the time. So I happened to just be in that era and have cards as a result of that. And maybe I would think differently if I was if I was a 20-year-old college student nowadays looking at Old School and going, God damn, I wish I could play in that format. And here's this asshole saying that, you step up, man, be a man and go and scrimp and save for 5 years to afford a Power 9 set.
Yeah.
My perspective is certainly warped by that. But
great argument, guys. Tell us what you think in the comments below. All right, next question. What would happen to the deck if Tomb got restricted? Jadam Tomb, that is. How do you say it?
Tome.
Jadam Tome.
JM Day.
JM Tome. What do you think? Restricted?
I think just even having the conversation about restricting a 4-mana artifact that requires 8 mana investment to draw a single card from it as a restricted card is absolutely absurd. I mean, I think that Jam Day Tome is, I think it's a staple tool for the format. I think that it has a vital place in a certain type of deck. And it just so happens that the deck that Tome is most comfortable in is very likely the strongest deck in the format as well. But Control, the deck style Control, is very beatable by lots of different strategies. If you understand how the deck functions and how to beat it, if you understand how to pace your threats, it does require a high skill level to be able to beat a control deck, a dedicated control deck in the format. But if you come prepared for it and you have the right tools, you should be able to beat it a majority of the time unless the player is absolutely top tier. In which case it doesn't even really matter what the matchup is, because if they massively outskill you, they probably should be beating you regardless. But I would restrict a card like Mishra's Factory.
Yeah, I was going to say Mishra's Factory.
Before I would restrict a card like Jam Day Tome.
Great question, but Mishra's Factory should be restricted first. All right, next we have Kent Hyde. Kent Hyde says, what is your favorite win con in the deck? Win con.
My favorite win condition.
Favorite way to win. Most glamorous.
It's got to be Brain Geyser by far.
Sexy. You mean deck 'em?
Brain Geyser, yeah, for sure.
To deck 'em.
Yeah, not only because it's very funny actually, because there was a period in time when Ice Age came out. Oh, no, actually, was it Ice Age? No, it wasn't Ice Age. It was Mirage. Actually, what was the set that had Jester's Cap in it?
Ice Age.
That was Ice Age, right?
Yeah.
When Ice Age was printed and Jester's Cap came out, I must have had 100 emails within the first week or so, and countless people coming up to me at events and stuff and just showing me the card and clucking about, oh, what are you going to do now, Brian? This card's everywhere. You have no way to win the game anymore because they're going to take your 2 Sarahs and your Mirror Universe out of your deck and you're never going to be able to win. And I would just laugh inside, because removing my 2 Sarah Angels and my Mirror is doing me a favor. If you spend a card and 6 mana to remove 2 Sarahs and a Mirror from my deck, you are doing me a favor. It just did not understand that. That single Brain Geyser in my deck, I don't want to draw the Sarah Angels. I need them as a potential win contingency, and they have some other side uses. But if you thin my deck, if you spend 6 mana and a card to thin my deck of 3 cards that are most of the time just clunky and useless, you're doing me a favor. You make my deck more dense in terms of the cards that actually matter and win the matchup. So I won so many games in that era with Brain Geyser. And a very, very common sequence of plays, I ran 2 Scepters and 1 Tome back then. Because the deck was a mana drain deck, it was more focused around, and it had more counter spells in general. It was more focused around reducing your opponent's hand size down to nothing, sceptering away all the reactive cards, and eventually winning with a single threat in the form of a creature. But you would get these inevitable situations where I'd have 4 counter spells in hand. They have no cards in hand, which means that they've got 4 automatically dead draws. Like even if the top 4 cards in their deck are perfect, they're still drawing dead for 4 turns. And you'd often have a Tome running and possibly a library, and whatever, the game's completely over. But they would have capped you earlier, and they're thinking they've got the game completely, in the bag.
Right.
Paying no regard to the fact that you're drawing all these cards. And you would just have a sequencing thing where you would cast a Brain Geyser for, I'd have maybe 16, 17 mana in play, tap most of my mana, cast a Brain Geyser on them for 15, mana drain my own Brain Geyser, cast Time Walk, untap, regrow my Brain Geyser, now I've got all this extra mana from mana drain. Cast a Brain Geyser again and mana drain it a second time, recall for Time Walk and Brain Geyser and regrow.
Oh my god.
And you could just stack these effects while Time Walking and eventually Brain Geyser summon for 100.
You can mana drain your own Brain Geyser.
Right.
I forgot about
and
that.
you move the mana between turns. In fact, in that game that I played in the semis at LurkerCon last weekend, had I managed to hit recall when Eric tapped out to try to fireball me to death, if I had hit recall in the sequence of cards, I would have been able to do exactly that sequence and killed him in a game that he could not have lost any other way.
Incredible. That was an incredible game, guys. We will have video and commentary on that. All right, so let's do, we have about 2 minutes or so on this video. Let's
Give me a quick question.
Quick question on this one. All right, so these are great questions, guys. Excellent. What is your favorite reptile? Not including dinosaurs. Ken Fritz asks. Reptile.
Well, I don't think the dinosaurs were reptiles. I think that they were dinosaurs.
Okay, well,
I think
that's what he said.
Yeah, well, I think the belief is that dinosaurs are warm-blooded, right?
What's your? What is your
third
favorite reptile?
My Third favorite
Yeah,
reptile.
actually, that's the question.
Wow.
What the heck's that mean?
If I were to say my favorite reptile, it would probably be a rosy boa. I think they're awesome. But
Steak?
yeah, snake.
Oh, boa constrictor.
Yeah, I mean there aren't a lot of choices when it comes to reptiles.
All right, that's a good.
But
pass.
well, it's a rosy boa in particular. They're very, very pretty and very benevolent. They're very gentle. But he asked for third favorite.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
All right, my third favorite reptile is a blue belly lizard.
Blue belly lizard.
I'll go with that. A blue belly lizard.
All right, another quick question, Brian.
Yes.
Do you work out and like prepare for your games back in the day? How'd you take care of yourself?
When you say workout, you mean like do I lift?
Yeah, did you like back in the day when you were playing and you got about a minute and a half?
All right.
What did you do?
The answer is no. I was a high school athlete, a varsity athlete. I did wrestling and distance running, mile and 2 mile, and then cross country, and took that very seriously and was very competitive. But once I graduated from high school, I decided I was done with distance running competition, and I still had the body of a runner, but I had the lifestyle of a couch potato for sure. I spent all of my time playing Magic and not worrying about health, and I think I pretty much coasted on the fact that I was just young as far as being prepared physically for tournaments. I tended to not worry about nutrition or sleep or anything. I remember playing 16-hour straight days at tournaments and otherwise, and not even eating and not even feeling anything about it. Like I would walk out of the tournament site and in a wave, the entire day's activities and all the focus and not eating and stuff would kind of hit me, and I'd feel overwhelmed by it and tired. But when I was in the zone and playing, I would just go on pure brain adrenaline, and not that there's adrenaline in your brain, but I would be coasting on just being like high and euphoric on your brain being supercharged about Magic.
All right, guys, great questions in this video. All right, let's look for another part here coming soon. Brian, thanks again.
Sure.
God, that